afternoon. I'm Robert Fripple-Capiello, Editor-in-Chief, Hospitality Technology. Welcome to Truly Uninterrupted, putting connectivity at the forefront of digital strategies. We have a brief safe harbor message. You don't have to read every word. I'm going to summarize it for you. You're going to hear thought leadership up here. You're going to hear the words will and may. These are predictive statements. They are not intended literally to predict the future. Just want to be clear about that. And now, let me introduce our esteemed panel. We are so lucky to have Dr. Chris Spencer, CISO at Nomadix and Global Reach. Chris, come on up. Richard Wagner, Director of Certification and Compliance at Nomadix. And Rohan Jani, AVP Guest Technology at Hyatt Hotels. So we have today our session is a three-part agenda. We're going to kick it off with a panel discussion about the importance of uninterrupted connectivity and the Passpoint solution. Then we are going to break out into small groups. You don't have to do that now. We will give you instructions and lead you in that. And then finally, report backs. Report backs will probably happen on a rolling basis during breakout groups. And we are going to start our panel with Dr. Chris Spencer, starting with the question, what is Passpoint?
Thank you, Robert. Would you like to go to the next slide for me? Thank you. So Passpoint, for those that don't know, and I know there's lots of faces in here that I recognize, and I say it's actually, to be honest, just going to start, it's quite emotional to be up here after 18 months of not being able to go in front of people, so it's great to be back here. But Passpoint is a Wi-Fi standard. It's certified by the Wi-Fi Alliance. Its vision or its aim is to allow a mobile device to auto-discover, negotiate, and authenticate to a Wi-Fi network as seamlessly and as frictionlessly as possible. When we set out to look at that standard, we basically looked at what the mobile phone does today on a cellular network. And to give you a bit of a context to that, by what I mean there is that when we step off of a plane, our phone takes a few minutes, but it will automatically connect to a cellular service. We don't have to go in, we don't have to choose an operator, we don't have to do anything like that. It will actually do that for us. So we looked at that and we wanted to try and copy that with the Wi-Fi. And we came up with these three sort of pillars that you can see on the slide here. And that was, we wanted to make sure it was secure from the start, from every level. We wanted it to be easy to provision the device and easy from a guest or from a consumer to actually connect to that Wi-Fi. We wanted the device to auto-discover, communicate with that access point, negotiate, and again, authenticate to that without us having to get our device out of our pocket, search for, I'm sure if you've all looked for the networks that are here, there's 15, 16 different networks, and it's knowing which one to interact with to get access. So Passpoint was there to try and solve that. And the third one really was allow networks to join together to create this carrier roaming type scenario. And it's not necessarily just for carriers, it's to allow networks to join. So you could, for example, have a profile issued by this hotel that allows me to go outside and interact with other Wi-Fi networks and seamlessly connect to them. Not have to go and find the SSID, select the SSID, trade some information. It was all around that automatic, seamless connectivity. Cool. So that's what we set out to achieve.
Nice. And so, pardon me. So, I apologize for my vision. Key features and benefits. Again, we're going to stick with Dr. Chris Spencer.
Thank you. If you'd like to go to the, thank you very much. Yeah. So what we wanted to do on this slide, and I know we've got lots of, a short amount of space to do this, was I picked on a few areas that we wanted to try and talk about around benefits and features. So I'm going to go along each one as we go. So the one-time registration, the guest engagement, terms and conditions acceptance. Again, if we look at a mobile phone, and if we remember when we first signed our first mobile phone contract, we accepted terms and conditions at that point. We were then given a SIM card or a QR code if it's an eSIM, and we went through provisioning our device for that cellular service. The same can be looked at with Passpoint. It's a one-time registration for that particular identity provider, that brand, that chain, to get that profile for that device. The second one, a home-like automatic connectivity experience. Again, that guest experience wants to be like our home. When we go home, our device simply connects back to our home network securely. We don't have to worry about captive portals and other means of doing that. So again, we wanted that home-like automatic experience. Roaming across brands and partner locations. I touched on that briefly a few seconds ago, but the concept around Passpoint is to allow these networks to join together, not just within a brand, and within a brand itself. That is very, very useful. If you've got guests traveling between the same brand hotels, if they are loyal to that brand, when they return to that brand, we don't need them to go through that whole process again of accepting terms and conditions. They've already done that previously. They should be allowed to connect back to that network. But the additional part of that really is that it can allow brands and the Passpoint profile providers the ability to do deals with other networks. So imagine going from here and going to the airport and still remaining connected through that experience. And that's one of the goals that we want to achieve. Onboarding, as I said, going back to the mobile, it's a SIM card that's typically posted to us. Onboarding through a loyalty app can be the same kind of solution. It's a one-time process. We accept terms and conditions, we comply with whatever we need to comply with, then we can activate the profile. Or it could be an OSU, which that little abbreviation stands for an online sign-up server. So a web-based delivery of that. And again, we see that in the mobile phone world today. Typically, it's a QR code. If we're using an eSIM, we'll be sent a QR code in the post. We scan that with our mobile. It will take us to a website where we've maybe got some activation to do again. But it's typically that one time. The improved security, discovery, and authentication encryption. As I said, we set out to do this securely from the start. Not only is the authentication secured, the in-air traffic, so it's a secure network rather than an open Wi-Fi network, which is very important to give confidence to our guests and our consumers that they are using a secure network to do that. But end-to-end, if we move straight onto the improved privacy, end-to-end, we looked at this, and from a back-end platform, we also reduced the amount of PII, personally identifiable information, that was shared. And just to give you an example of that, there are many components to a Wi-Fi network, from the access point, from the provider who provides that service to the internet service provider, that potentially could come into contact with information around that guest. So one of the things we do within Passpoint is from an authentication process, is we anonymize what's known as the outer identity. So we know that identity belongs to a brand, or what we refer to in the industry as an IDP, an identity provider. So we know who that belongs to, but we don't know that true identity. So that helps secure your supply chain as well in protecting that identity. The next point along really on MAC address randomization, I'm sure we've all heard about MAC address randomization and what that can do to certain platforms. Passpoint itself doesn't rely on the MAC address. Fundamentally, the MAC address is very important. It's actually part of the core network, and it's required by switches, access points, to know where to send the traffic. But it's only valid, or needs to be valid, for that particular connected session. After that, the MAC address can change again, and it won't affect the Passpoint solution. And the final one really around compliance with best practices and regulations. Again, you can assure the identity of the person you are giving the profile to, so the liabilities can all be in place, and it can be shared within that organization safely.
Great. Now we'd like to discuss the availability. Is it available on the market today?
So actually the standard came out in 2014. It was actually, the release 1 was certified in 2014. So it's been around for many, many years. It says most on there. I would say almost all enterprise class access points, the big names, support Passpoint. It's actually part of a new certification program from the Wi-Fi Alliance called Wi-Fi Advantage. So if you are going for WPA 3 certification on your access point, you actually have to make sure it supports Passpoint as well, which is an interesting paradigm shift for how we certify products going forward. It's natively supported now on all major operating systems, so Android, iOS, macOS, Windows, including the new Windows 11 is also Passpoint compliant. The bottom really just comes back into a few more of those benefits around not only is it available today, we've actually got real life networks that have been out there for 3 and 4 years that are doing mobile data offload. There are numerous Wi-Fi roaming agreements in places and things like that. And then additionally to Passpoint itself, there's a few other technologies that are built on top of Passpoint, and that is open roaming, which is a big WBA initiative to join Passpoint networks together to allow profiles to be interchanged with other Wi-Fi providers. We have Orion, which is a Google platform. We have Eduroam, which is an educational institute allowing students and academic staff to be able to connect to Wi-Fi networks elsewhere. And across Europe, we have one called GovRoam as well, which is allow MPs and to work in their different offices and things like that. So yes, it's certainly available today.
Very cool. Thank you. How does Passpoint help stay connected?
Next. Okay, so based on my 20-some odd years in the hospitality industry working for one of the major hotel brands, I'm going to kind of describe what could possibly be done as part of the guest journey. In other words, it's what does the guest really want when they go on a trip? And basically the question is, or the answer is internet connectivity throughout the whole process. So how could that be accomplished? So if you look at this circle, the outer part of the circle really describes where you are in the journey. The middle part would be potential ways that you could connect while you're on that journey. And of course, the middle is you're really trying to get to the internet. And what I'm going to talk about is the possibility of how Passpoint could fit into this environment. So obviously, you're at your house. Typically, you're going to be using either WPA 2 or 3. But there are certain ISPs today, for example, Comcast, I know, has the ability, they've built Passpoint into their environment. So if you're using one of those vendors, they would have a Passpoint certificate stored on your device and you can connect. But typically, you would use WPA 2 or 3. So now you go to the airport. Now, if you have a relationship maybe with the airline, and maybe the airline has a relationship with that particular airport, they may allow you to automatically connect when you get to the airport. So you would just get connected as if you were at home. The next process is you get on the airplane. Now, a lot of the major hotel brands are having relationships with the airlines. So, for example, if Marriott had a relationship with United, they would allow you to automatically, when you get on the plane, you'd see the United, and you might see another one, but you basically would just get connected. You wouldn't have to go through the normal process like Chris was talking about. So now you get to the other end of the air flight. And once again, you may have some delays. You may be going to another airport, but let's say that you just want to check or maybe do an Uber or something of that nature. So at that point, you potentially would be connected again. The next part of the process is now you're getting the shuttle to go to the hotel. Now here's an opportunity where We talked a little bit in one of the previous sessions about 5G. Well, let's say that the hotel that you're going to has enabled a MEC, local processing, that allows that van to have the appearance that you're on the hotel network. Well, if the hotel basically has, Passpoint deployed, you basically get on the van and you automatically are connected to the hotel network. At which point, it's as if you're in the hotel, and if you want to check your room or things of that nature. And then we sort of repeat the process. But there could be some other issue or some other opportunities while you're at the hotel. For example, you might go into a coffee shop that happens to have Passpoint, and they have a relationship with the hotel. You could go to a restaurant down the street while you're at the hotel. The next part of the process, you would be going to the convention center. And there again, and you'll see in an example I'm going to show in a minute, you go into that conference, and I noticed, I've been to a number of conferences where you're trying to get connected, as Chris said, which SSID do I use? And then a lot of times, I asked Abby this morning, what's the passcode here? I didn't know I was trying to get connected. If Passpoint was enabled, I would just basically walk in, and I'd automatically be on the network. And then we sort of repeat the process as we go home, the same idea. Now, obviously, all of this doesn't exist today. There are pockets of it, but the potential exists that if you follow this circle, you could basically be connected through the whole journey, from the time you left your house until you return to the house. Next slide.
Mm-hmm, sure.
What I'm going to show you now is an example of where this was actually implemented. And I was involved in a part of this a couple of years ago. But San Jose actually has, and you've heard the term smart city, and I think typically what you consider a smart city, it's got IoT and things of that nature. But the other term of smart city is basically you're allowing people in that city to be connected all the time. So, as Chris said before, it allows you to do seamless roaming. And in the case of this particular example, they've implemented Passpoint in the city. So in the downtown area, you have the ability, once you get your Passport profile installed on your device, you're allowed to roam in certain areas of the city. They have it tied to the convention center, so if you're attending a conference, you basically go into the conference or into the convention center and you're connected. Same way at the airport, because the city of San Jose actually manages the whole environment. But one of the things that it does allow them to do is they've expanded into places like the library. When I was involved in this project, there was a convention, I think it was something to do with the WPA. Basically, they asked the hotel, could you enable Passpoint for those people that are attending the conference? So basically, what would happen is they would come into the hotel, get their device registered, and they would experience connectivity from the time that they left the hotel all the way back to the airport without ever worrying about what's the SSID. So that's really kind of the long-term vision of why we would want to go down this way. I know a lot of hotels are still using the concept of last name and room number, but with this ability, you basically don't have to worry about that. Once you are registered in that device, and there may be certain, like I said, there may be certain relationships with other businesses in that particular venue, you can easily connect to those venues rather easily without even having to enter anything on your device.
Cool. Now we're going to ask Rohan Jani, AVP Guest Technology at Hyatt, to talk about why Hyatt Hotels chose Passpoint.
Thank you, Robert, and it's great to be here. I think we chose Passpoint because of these two guys right here. They know about Passpoint more than anybody else in this room. But on serious note, 7 years ago, right around this time in December, in 2014, Hyatt Hotels made an announcement that we are going to provide free Wi-Fi across our enterprise. And once we made that announcement, we started working on different ways of seamlessly onboarding our guests onto our Wi-Fi network. How could we make their experience seamless? And we came up with a proprietary central authentication system that we call Freebird that was based around capturing the device MAC addresses. And it really worked. It was a game changer, and it worked really well for us for several years, and it served us well. But however, with the advent of MAC randomization and the privacy and the security requirements that are out there, we started looking at the next generation product in this landscape that not only provides us the security that we need, but also integrates into our loyalty platform to drive that differentiation, some of what John talked about earlier this morning. How do you take a differentiating factor for your brand and shine that? So we hired a third-party consultant called 5th Gen Wireless and did an extensive study of what Passpoint is, learning from basic, who are the providers, what platforms are out there, and then finally made our selection. So again, we came across phenomenal providers within the industries and their products, but we ended up choosing Nomadix as our provider of choice for several reasons. Number one, we found that they have a very strong software integration capabilities. Number two, they have a very strong cybersecurity team led by Dr. Chris Spencer here, and they understand our ecosystem very, very well. And then number three, we looked into our own enterprise ecosystem, and we found that 90% of our hotels today have Nomadix Wi-Fi gateway. So if we were to deploy a product that we want to scale rapidly, that would be very easy for us if we use Nomadix as our provider of choice. So that's really the rationale behind why we picked Nomadix as our provider of choice. We are very excited. And in the next slide, we are going to talk about the first baby step we are taking into the Passpoint world starting 2022. So imagine a scenario where you are a member of Hyatt, a loyal member, you sign into your app, you will pull up the drawer, the blue section is the drawer. Within our app, there will be an icon that will say connect to Wi-Fi. You click it one time, and the Passpoint profile will be downloaded within your app once for all, and you will be seamlessly connected to Wi-Fi within the hotel, guest rooms, meeting spaces, etc. So again, like I said, this is our baby step, and we are starting with our members first in the first part of Q1 2022 in working with Nomadix, and then we are going to expand that relationship and that development effort for non-members, etc. So again, we are very excited to continue this journey and looking forward to it as well.
Thank you.
We're pleased to take questions from the audience before we kick off our small group brainstorm. If you see somebody raise their hand, you feel free to call on them, please.
No.
We'll also have, we will be breaking up into small groups for some brainstorming and then reporting back. So there are opportunities to ask questions and have those conversations later in the presentation.
I can see a question down here on the second row table.
Dick, you mentioned Comcast as a mature Passpoint service provider. As a subscriber to 3 service locations with Comcast, I find that it just doesn't work very well. That's probably because they're piggybacking off of unmanaged residential and small commercial networks. In the hotel environment, is more likely to work successfully?
I don't think it's really tied to Passpoint. I think it's tied to the coverage, because you're talking Wi-Fi hotspots in people's homes and people's businesses. And I've sort of experienced the same thing where you get kind of a weak signal and it says it's connected, but it really isn't. And I think it's just the way they've deployed this. There's a lot of hotspots. Every one of their routers they deploy in a person's home has an access point in it. And it displays 2 SSIDs, a public one and a Passpoint one. And obviously on the Passpoint one, you get higher bandwidth because you're a subscriber. But I'm not selling Comcast here. I've had some experience, the same thing that you have, and I think it's a coverage thing more than anything. Yeah.
I'm going to insert a quick housekeeping note. When you phrase a question like that, there's no need to mention a brand. It's the question can still be very productive without mentioning a specific brand, and its merits. Do we have more questions from the audience? As I said, there'll be opportunities for report backs and conversation. All right.
Both Chris and Dick, you mentioned possibility of some sort of federated access partnerships. Rohan, are you exploring any of those yet, or is that step 2 in your baby step, or step 5 in your baby step approach?
Could you repeat the first part of your question?
The possibility of linking up with other parties. So I think Dick mentioned United and Chris talked about.
Absolutely, no. Eventually, our goal is to leverage the Wi-Fi offload, the roaming capabilities, and make that seamless journey from the airport to the Starbucks to the hotel, et cetera. But I guess, we are one of the first ones entering this area as far as hotels and Passpoint are concerned. So we're taking a first step for our loyal members starting next year. And definitely, I think that roaming and then offload and that seamless connectivity beyond the hotel premise is on our roadmap, including monetizing the Wi-Fi network through the Passpoint. So there is definitely a opportunity to incentivize our owners for their Wi-Fi investment through Passpoint, and it's part of our long-term roadmap that we have prepared as part of our RFP exercise.
Okay. All right. We have time for one more audience question if you have it, or we'll move into our discussion of breakout groups. Okay.
We have a bunch of experts.
So we have a few guidelines for breaking up into groups. You don't have to start breaking up now. We're actually going to do this for you. The goal here is to discuss and answer key prompts and questions. The next slide is 3 big picture questions that will be the topics of the brainstorms. We'll break you up into groups, and we will help facilitate those conversations. Group brainstorming, it could last roughly 20 minutes, but as we get into the details of it, you'll see we'll be checking on you, and there'll be report backs during that process. Each group should assign, we'll call it a scribe, someone to, there's pads and paper at each table, and jot down group ideas with the goal of presenting them back to all of us. You would also want to assign a group presenter, and presentations on findings will conclude. I'm sorry. That note is the reporting back, and as I said, some of that will happen after about 10 minutes of brainstorming, and then more of it will happen later. We want to make sure that this is a technology discussion. We're not going to discuss specific products, and certainly not competitor mentions among the discussions. And the members of the panel will help facilitate. And now I'd like to show you the 3 questions, and then we will break you up into 3 groups. First question, based on your understanding of Passpoint, where would you see the most benefits for guests? Second question, based on your understanding of Passport, where would you see the most ROI for hoteliers and associates? And then question number 3, what major blockers do you see in adopting Passport for your organization?
So it looks like we've settled into groups. I think there's another group 2 all the way in the back, which is absolutely lovely. We will run and check in with you. So the idea here is we're going to give you a little time as groups to work through some of these questions. Group 1, start with question 1. Based on your understanding of Passpoint, where would you see the most benefits for guests? So we want you to spend some time, take a few minutes, and start to think through real applications where you could see this type of technology playing a role in the environment. If you are a group number 2, we want you to dig in on question 2. Based on your understanding of Passpoint, where would you see the most ROI for hoteliers and associates? So we want you to start to dig into the ROI question. And then if you are a part of group 3, we'll have you start with the topic around major blockers. What major blockers do you see in adopting Passpoint for your organization or for the industry, certainly as a whole? But no doubt, all of these questions are kind of intertwined, and your conversations will move organically through them all. So start with the question of record, and then as we move through the discussion, you'll have time to cover all of the topics. We're going to give you about probably the next 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come and check in. We'd love to hear and share and do some reporting back on your on some of the key highlights from your group discussions. All right. We are going to mix it up, and rather than starting with group 1 for some insights, we're going to start with group 3, which had the very fun task of discussing some of the challenges, some of the potential blockers that might stand in the way of adopting Passpoint. So I'm going to drop in here with group 3. I think we have a scribe. Would you like to also report some of the ideas back? Graham? Okay, great.
Can I have the notes then if I'm supposed to be doing this? So, major blockages. It's been around for a long time, but it hasn't been heavily adopted within the hospitality industry. So why not? Next one, it's rather an uncertain ROI. Some of the existing infrastructure can't fully support Passpoint, so a number of controllers would need to be upgraded from the versions that they're currently running in order for it to be able to work properly with full security. We've seen examples where it's been implemented poorly in a sort of residential environment. I haven't personally experienced it, but Spectrum apparently give you 2 different profiles, one for secure SSIDs and one for open ones. And therefore, if it's not going to be as secure, maybe people wouldn't be as keen to use it. Is it really as simple to install as we think? Has the rest of the hotel business bought in to the benefits that there are? If this is an initiative that's pushed by IT, it's going to struggle. But if the business embraces what can happen, then there's an opportunity to really use it. It does, it could potentially cross some of the loyalty rules that are there already as to what level gets what when it comes to free or paid Wi-Fi. So loyalty would need to buy into it. And also, there is a cost, presumably, to linking it to the loyalty database, and that could be quite high. So there might be a brand paying for that with owners getting the benefit from it. How does that work from an ownership and a brand perspective?
There's some really great points. Thank you for, I love that we're starting with the challenges, right? I said to this group, we're going to start with the want rather than end with the want so that we can kind of build on some of those very salient points. So I'm going to move over now to table 1 and give you guys an opportunity to sort of fire back a little bit, right? What are some of the opportunities? What are some of the most salient benefits for guests? And who is our official spokesperson at the table? Miss Emily?
So we said for guest benefits, definitely the number 1 is convenience. You can get the automatic login on your next visit to that same property or to another property, amongst the chain. Potential way for non-members to download, we were talking about Hyatt, if you have it on your company app, and it's just members that typically use your app, it could be a way to gain non-members just so that they can also gain that convenience. And then along with that, you would be getting some of their data and information as well. Can build use cases in the future. Like for example, we were talking about targeted selling. So then outside service providers won't gain the data, and only the property who has Passpoint will own it. Can be a gateway for airports or others moving forward to maybe streamline the process if a customer has already been introduced, familiar and trusting of using Passpoint, at a different property. Did I miss anything? And security. That's
great. Fantastic. So Group 3 brought up one of the challenges was to have a better understanding of the ROI, right? And so I think it's fantastic that we have 2 tables that have leaned in on that topic, and we can spend a little bit of time on it. So I'm going to start over here and ask for our official spokesperson to share some of your ideas around ROI.
Thank you, Abby. We identified 4 aspects of ROI, the big one being removing friction for the frequent traveler that's a loyalty member, the truly loyal guest, and their relationship with the brand where every time they walk in, they're just connected with their mobile device and their laptop. And that's really going to hit home when that guest stays in another brand where they then have to go through the whole login process. So there's the big ROI there. Our other aspects of ROI are really kind of related to density, and they might apply more in markets where a brand or a management company has multiple properties. So if you're complexing operations where you've got management staff moving from one hotel to another, they're going to save time and take friction out of their workday by being automatically logged on as they go from hotel to hotel. And if you've got enough density and volume, it starts to make business sense to look at negotiating an agreement to do cellular traffic offloading and get paid back for the use of your backhaul by the cellular carriers, where in these really dense cities, the only way they can add capacity is to leverage Wi-Fi networks. So those were our elements of ROI.
Great. And we'd love to have the group 2 in the back build on those.
Gentlemen, this gentleman, oh, that.
It's me. It's Ray Hatch with Comcast. Thanks for the plug. So aside of those 4, which were great, and we had many of those as well, advertising has always been something that's been discussed over consumer-facing Wi-Fi. The complexity of that is that you always have to connect, and so automatic connection means you have a better ability to deliver advertising through your Wi-Fi service. Certainly, opportunities to drive more loyalty, I think great. The authentication through the app is a way to push more downloads of your loyalty platform. We think security is a marketable property, especially for business travelers who may be more aware of some of the insecurity of an open Wi-Fi network. So, a lot of opportunity to drive upside in revenue.
Yeah, we should be able to do something with them. I think we've heard from everyone. All right, fantastic. So we still have a little bit of time, and I think what we'd love to do is bring the panelists just to share some of their key final thoughts on these 3 questions. In particular, I think it would be lovely if they spent a few minutes addressing some of the challenges.
Sorry.
I think if you want to take the stage, you
Yes, I
certainly can.
All right.
Who's Chris?
Come in.
So let's start with some of the blockers. I would love to give you the opportunity to address those, and then also certainly the benefits and the ROI. But what are some thoughts about what you heard that it's not yet widely been around a while, not yet widely adopted? Why?
Well, blockers are many. I think one of the group mentioned that you need overall buy-in for multiple stakeholders around this technology because it's not a proven technology. And it's the matter of leading edge versus bleeding edge kind of thing. Although the Passpoint technology has been around since 2014, and you see it in malls, like you go in big malls, you go at certain other public area location. There are some cities that Dick mentioned in San Jose. They have Passpoint, and sometimes you go there, you get connected, you don't even realize that you are using the Passpoint service. But for hotel industry in specific, there has been some hesitation to adapt the Passpoint service. And I think that is going to be one of the challenges to overcome. And then since that is not a table stake item, and it's not something as hot as a digital key or something like that, I think it's hard to convince your leadership team to say, I want $5 million or $2 million or $1 million investment into a technology that has not been widely adopted yet. So I think that's why we brought in a third-party consultant like 5th Gen Wireless to paint the broader picture and see where your enterprise is today, what's your current infrastructure, what will happen if you don't invest in it. Are you going to have ransomware attacks? Are you going to have security breaches? Are you going to have a headline in the newspaper that your hotel brand got breached and the guest data was compromised because of the poor Wi-Fi security? All these losses, are they better to have that, or is it better to invest in a technology that's going to future-proof you into the coming years? So we made that conscious decision. We did a very thorough analysis, and we realized that Passpoint is the way to go. There is no other choice for us into the future. It's just a matter of time.
I'll base it on my previous employer. From my experience, and I think the gentleman that was talking about the cruise line was right on in terms of getting buy-in by corporate management. You have to get everybody to agree that this is the right direction to go as a company, because if everybody's not on board, you're going to get so many roadblocks. I can give you an example of, when I was involved in trying to sell this to management, enterprise architecture got involved, and they said, well, we should look at some other opportunities. Maybe there's other ways of doing this. The second thing I think it's important is you better make sure that you have a solid and working product. Whoever you go with, it's got to work. And you need to make it easier for the guests to basically get connected, get them educated on what will work and what won't work. And if you have a product, for example, that a guest tries to connect and he has an old Android device and it doesn't support it, the technology should tell him that it doesn't support it and give him the ability, that he can use something else. But I think those are kind of the key things to make it work. And to his point, there are devices that it doesn't work yet, but I think one of the things that made some of the brands look at this technology is the MAC randomization. That has caused a lot of issues. I do also want to comment on Graham's comment about tying it into the brand loyalty programs. I think that was one of the key benefits that most of the brands, or at least from my experience, that they felt they could offer that guest, that repeated guest, the ability to get connected and get higher bandwidth. But what's happening today with a lot of the hotels is they're giving the guests much more bandwidth. I know when I first started looking at providing Wi-Fi for guests, we were talking about giving them a meg. Giving them the better guests, or the higher loyalty guests got 3 megs. Well, guess what? A lot of the hotels, I know there's a hotel, 90 megs they're giving a guest. I mean, you can't even use that much bandwidth. But the point is that, that is getting replaced. The bandwidth issue is going away because the hotels are buying gig connections. But I think security, and that was raised in one of the last sessions, security, it should be important to the hotel. I don't know if you've had any experiences where guests were complaining that someone, hacked my particular device, and it's going to happen. So I think the fact is, it's a good selling point, the fact that you're providing a secure connection to the guest seamlessly.
So I completely agree with Rowan and Richard, but I'd just go one step further as well on the security. I'm being attacked by a fly. On the security side, he's actually securing the back end of the platform as well. Again, we've said today, typically you enter your surname and a room number into a portal. How many suppliers are in that chain that have access to that information, that are logging that information, that have that information? What are they not only are they storing it correctly, but are they disposing of it correctly? Is there a proper retention policy in there? So one of the things within Passpoint is, because of that anonymization of the guest identity within that traffic flow, is even if they have it, they don't have anything of value to that. So you're actually protecting your supply chain as you go down there. And I think it was Graham that mentioned it. Certain technology doesn't support Passpoint. Passpoint's been out for since 2014, as we've said. I'm sure within the renewal cycle of what hotels and brands are doing within that renew, Passpoint can be one of those reasons. It shouldn't be the only reason, admittedly, but there are many more. Wi-Fi 6. There are so many benefits of moving to Wi-Fi 6. Wi-Fi and 5G can play a role together. They can support each other in that delivery. So there are other reasons to upgrade your technology and your infrastructure and your internal components to do that. And if that gives you then the ability to provide Passpoint to your guests or your associates, then I think that's got to be a good thing. Privacy and security of guests has got to be a consideration in that.
And would you like to comment on ROI? I think the benefits to guests are so clear. I don't think we need to explore that more, unless you would like to. But I think if you want to speak briefly to ROI, I think that would be a wonderful way to close.
So I spent time between a few tables, and potentially there are staff that are displaced within cities at the moment. You've got managers that travel around from brand to within the brand and things like that, allowing them from an associate point of view to remain connected as well, without having to go and get what's today's code, please, and it might be on a chalkboard or a post-it note on the back of the room for them to gain access, to give them secure access to allow that to do that. So I think there's a sort of an ROI there for the associates. Whether that is staff displacement or whether that is management going around the different brands. So I think there's some benefit there as well.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's, considering the turnover rate in hotels for associates, especially, in housekeeping and the service organization, it's important that you have the ability that when that guest leaves, that you can prevent them from connecting to the network again. And you can do that by revoking the certificate. But basically that, we've always talked about the guest, but in reality, you have that whole other, and when the gentleman from the cruise line was talking about, that's the other side of the equation. You have the staff that's supporting the guests, and if you make it easier for them, it'll benefit the guests in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So from a ROI standpoint, for a brand like Hyatt, there are three different things that matter. First is consistent Wi-Fi experience. As we saw in the earlier presentation where Robert, you shared a lot of data, 90% of the guests still think Wi-Fi is very important in terms of adoption. So with MAC randomization, if the connection for Wi-Fi is going to break every few hours because you can no longer detect the device, that's a huge problem, and every single brand should be worried about it if they're not worried about it right now. So it's just a matter of time before those connections start breaking, and then people start, firefighting those situations. So this is one way to get ahead of that problem and provide that seamless connectivity. The second ROI component is the potential ransomware problems that we talked about. So the cost of not having a secure network or a secure process to onboard into a Wi-Fi network can be much larger than than investing into the system itself. So that's the second tangible ROI. And the third one, obviously, is, for us, selfishly, we want to drive the revenue away from the online travel agencies and move that revenue direct to Hyatt through direct booking. So if you're a Hyatt member and you're getting value-added services like Passpoint, then you're going to book direct with Hyatt. When you book direct with Hyatt, we don't have to pay a commission to online travel agencies. And since post-pandemic, we have seen that our direct booking channel has increased significantly by 30 or 40%. So we want to double down on that opportunity and then have most guests book with us directly instead of going to Expedia or other websites. So the guests are never going to be a member and download your app and stay a member unless there are some really value-added functionalities available in the app, as John mentioned in the morning too, that brings them again and again back to the app. So that's really what we are striving for from an ROI standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed learning so much more about Nomadix, so much more about Passpoint with the three of you. We've had some lively conversations in preparation for this event, and it's been wonderful. We have time for another closing thought or two, if there's something that comes to
Unless
mind
there's
you'd like to
questions.
share.
Yeah, unless there's questions.
Sure.
I think Patrick?
He's going to ask a cybersecurity question.
No, actually, I'm going to say that HT&G and H&LA implemented this set of software and related requirements years or so ago at an event like this in Portugal.
Yes, we did.
So,
I remember.
to me, that was successful, and I'd say very successful. Why hasn't it seen the adoption that I myself personally thought it would have taken based on that success beyond that? I mean, is it implementation issues? Is it, something else?
I think from my experience, a lot of it, Patrick, has been education. I don't think, a lot of the senior management still don't kind of understand this from a technology. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree, but I think also part of it is how you present the user experience to a very good product. Passpoint is an amazing engine, but if you don't present the user experience in a very subtle manner, it's going to fail, and that's why it has not been popular. And that's why what we are looking at this time around, we are looking at Passpoint from a real user perspective, and starting, like I said, baby step with the Hyatt app. It shouldn't be very cumbersome. If you're a member, you're logged into your app, you connect one time to Passpoint, and that should be it. You shouldn't be downloading profile certificates after certificates, and you don't have to be a technical geek to use the Passpoint service. So as long as one can break that barrier from the value that Passpoint provides and the ease of use for the end customer, I think that's the gap that was holding us back, and that's really where we are trying to overcome and leapfrog that gap.
And I'd probably just add to that as well is there's the marketing angle from what is perceived as value from the captive portal. I think we've had to try and break that down as well. There's often we've got a measurable statistic there. We get 5,000 portal views a week or something like that. So there's that concept of that's going to go away. Am I going to lose that touch point with the guest? Well, actually, I have a view on that around when a captive portal comes up, actually, the guest isn't really looking at what that captive, they're not taking in what's on that captive. They're just doing whatever it is to get online. The only reason they've opened their device is because they want to get online. Otherwise, it would still remain in their pocket. So you've actually created a barrier there to do that. So I think there's been this sort of concern that you're going to lose that touch point. Well, actually, if Passpoint is deployed correctly, you actually get far more touch points because you can actually understand where the guest is in the property. Are they still in the property? And message, if you've got an app, it could be a push notification. So it could actually welcome the guest as they walk through the door on their first time visiting that particular brand. And, we talk about digital room keys, digital check-in and all of that. Guess what? A lot of that needs connectivity. In fact, all of that needs connectivity. So if your first hurdle of not getting connectivity stops all of those other kinds of things we want to do. So I think it's, as Richard has said, it's been that education process to get this mindset out there that there is a lot more value that can be got. It's sort of, and it's one of those sort of long-term visions that when we've got this right, we won't be discussing this on this stage because you'll just be connected. We will simply be connected. And I don't think the guest is overly concerned if that is 5G or Wi-Fi 6 or Wi-Fi 5. As long as they have the service they need at the time they want that service, I don't think it's necessarily important what that particular carrier service is, which is why I think 5G and Wi-Fi 6 can play together very, very well in our environments.
Cool. Thank you. We have time for another question.
But I do remember the Lisbon trial. Actually, that
worked out well.
That was very, very good, and we got some stats from that. We should get that infographic out again and get that sent out by HTG. Of course.
Well, that's why it was so successful, right?
we have any final questions in the room? Hospitality Technology would be delighted to cover this topic as a part of our wrap-up from the show. So I'd like to collect the great notes from our scribes so that HT can have an opportunity to lean in and cover this topic a little bit more and capture these great ideas. Gentlemen, I think we can wrap up.
Thanks for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.